You wouldn't know the answer to that. Don't look at me.
I have to look.
Yeah, come on. We have 6.
I don't know. I don't. Don't have a chair or a vice chair. No.
Hey, ready?
Chair.
Plate up there.
Really? I went from there, the traffic was not. And you'd be, I mean, left lane driving, and all these cars coming out towards you and crossing over from the right lane, right in front of you.
Was it just a normal day, or was it?
I think it is, but, you know, I don't drive that around that much during the daytime because I'm in my office. Boy, it was stupid out there.
That's always a problem for me. Not really bad. It's all wrong.
We need to put more place. Actually, that's fine.
Yeah, so.
That was from what he was telling me. She called me to tell me about it. And she told me about it. She won't be
Yeah.
ready. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our ECHO board meeting. I know things look a little differently because I am neither the chair or the vice chair. The chair had anticipated being absent today. However, the vice chair had planned to be here. Pat Northy's your vice chair, and her husband is continuing to be ill. And so at the last minute, she had to call and say that she was unable to be here today. So we're going to have a roll call, and then I'm going to ask for an election of just a chair for today to run the meeting. So we'll leave it at that. We got Reggie coming in. So if you'll call the roll, Jill, please.
Jade Pendergast, Pat Northy, Jeffrey Alt,
Here.
Sarah Lee Morrissey, Pat Patterson, David Romeo,
Here.
Reggie Santilli,
Here.
Stacy Simmons,
Here.
Jack Surratt.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Okay, so can I get a nomination from the floor for a chair for this meeting?
I would like to nominate Jack Surratt.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair for today? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, like sign? All right, so Jack, if you would go ahead and move over here to the chair seat, you will be able to see the lights if someone presses that they wish to speak. I'll move your sign for you if you want. Oh, you got it? All right.
Next one.
Oh, sorry.
Get the gavel.
Oh.
Well, I'll do my best. I have an interim position. All right. Well, I guess we start with the approval of the committee minutes, committee meeting. Oh, Sarah Lee. Okay.
Sorry.
I'm the interim chair because the chair and vice chair are not here.
I apologize for being late and interrupting everyone.
We just really started. Anyway, the minutes for the June 10th meeting, I guess they were read. Is there any adjustments that need to be made to those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, duly approved. We're moving fast. That's good. Okay. Um, Oh, let's call vote. Thank you. Should be in this position. All those agree that the minutes are fine as they are?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, let's move on to old business. Here we're bringing up the exceptional grant, which was tabled before. Brad?
Yeah, so we just wanted to revisit this, if you'd advance the slide for me, Jill. There was some discussion at the joint workshop. There was some conversation about the amount, and so we just wanted to revisit that with the committee and have you have some discussion and provide some direction or recommendation to the council.
I'll go ahead. The reason that the total price fluctuated through the years was because of the direct expenditures for off-beach parking and then the boardwalk situation. So that $3 million exceptional grant, I believe, was reduced to 1.8 to make sure we didn't blow through all the money with one grant.
Well, I've given this some thought, and I read the notes last time, and we were talking about it, the difference ratio of 4-to-1 versus 1-to-1, and there was a debate about that. And I think your concern, Jeffrey, was that that some of these guys may not have the financial stability, and they should have the financial stability to keep with their commitments over time, and that it was essentially the reason we had even looked at the 1-to-1 position was to promote these kind of grants and to facilitate larger projects. And so I had a question, and perhaps, Brad, you can answer this, or Donna. The question I had was, have we ever had a 4-to-1 position, an exceptional grant come through with 4-to-1? And if so, who did that?
It has been several years. Oh, sorry, Carmen Hall, Community Assistance Director. It has been several years since we've had a grant come through with that ratio, but if I am correct, MOAS and Earl Brown and DeLand, both of those were exceptional grants with the 4-to-1.
I see. And 4-to-1 has been the circumstance the entire time for the.
I cannot answer that for the life of ECHO for the last 20 years, but I do know for at least the last 6+ years it's been 4-to-1. Okay. As long as all of us
I can answer
remember.
that. Yes. The fourth grant was the Lively Arts Center, News Journal Center. That was 4-to-1. That was 2002, 2003.
Okay. And what was the amount for that? Was the back then what?
2.4 million.
It was 2.4.
And didn't the Ocean Center?
The Ocean Center too, that I think was,
Yeah.
I think that was direct expenditure.
Yeah, I think
They
it
sort
was
of put
too. I don't-
together a 4-to-1 match, but they were building a convention center.
And they gave it to them all at once. There was one exceptional grant after it was built because it was part of a gallery, I believe. And instead of spreading it over 3 years, they did it in 1 year.
Well, the only reason I'm asking is, that there's been participation at least on the 4-to-1 position, and that I wanted to know in case there had been no participation, moving it to 1-to-1 is better. I mean, the idea was we like large projects, and we would like to facilitate this, and that's why we're looking at it be a 1-to-1 consideration. My opinion to this, it really comes to the if we want to facilitate it, I'm kind of the mindset that we should move it to 1-to-1, but keep it within the standards of being one of the top 2-tier items when we go through the process of evaluating. What that would do is it would allow us, if in fact the committee felt like the project was not valid, or we felt like there was a concern of them keeping to their commitment over time, we could then say, okay, it wouldn't, we get to vote, and you rank them, and if in fact that ranking falls below the top 2, then they're out anyway. So that way, it's kind of, I guess, splitting the baby in its own way. But to me, that way we facilitate larger projects, but at the same time, we get to judge, in fact, whether we believe they are true, legitimate projects that will stick to their commitment. Yes, Jeff.
In the description of the exceptional project, it says the exceptional project means a project of paramount and crucial county-wide importance, which provides for receipt of services by significantly large numbers of people in all areas of the county. Two things. It goes on to explain that the first thing that the advisory board does is vote on whether or not the project itself meets that criteria. The problem that we had the problem that I saw and a few people pointed out the last time this came up was we actually make that determination the day of the hearing or the day of the grant reviews, which kind of makes no sense. If somebody's bringing forth a countywide importance project, we should probably give it that clarification the year before. I mean, it takes a while to put these projects together.
Yeah, I always thought that was determined by the county itself and the staff of the county, whether it fell within that criteria. That's not right, Donna?
No, sir. Donna Butler, Community Services Director, these grants have always competed with the other grants, and we don't feel that it's our...
No, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. What I meant was the criteria of whether it being county-wide or that it fit the criteria of being an exceptional.
Yes, we absolutely would review it and help make a recommendation to you all on whether we felt that it met that criteria of being an exceptional grant, and whether it's really they're being able to make a case that it's an exceptional and county-wide impact.
Right.
And each of those that came before the ECHO board did, in fact, have a county-wide reach.
Right.
So,
yeah, and so, but what I mean is that would have been determined long before we got into the final review.
it would have, well, it would be,
Because
it would be part of the technical review process.
Exactly.
Alongside every other technical review. So that would be approximately a month to 6 weeks prior to your receiving the grant application.
Right. So,
That's not what this says.
well, no.
But the grant review, the application that we're going through, it has to be demonstrated and determined by a 3/4 majority of the appointed ECHO Advisory Board or ECHO Committee. So there's a technical review, but we as an advisory board still have to vote on it.
Correct.
And make that-
No, I know,
make that
but it would go through the review process, and that's what that meant. In other words,
It just means when you're voting on the applications, 3/4 of your board, so you've got 9, so at least 6,
has to be present.
7, would have to say this is a grant worthy of exceptional funding.
Right. But wouldn't that be within the final review process?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so, see,
Not
I think
taken
what
separately.
I think what happens is they determine whether the significance, if it fits within the general criteria that it's county importance and affects a lot of people. And then once it goes into the review process, it's already kind of been vetted in that regard. But then you're making judgments on the rest of it when you do the review process, and you're basically ranking it in these various categories, and then you place it within the list of the total. And in that total, you know, it falls down the line. And what I'm saying is that, in fact, as it was, if it falls within the first 2, if it's not within the first 2, then in fact, it's rejected completely. It's not considered.
We
an
would
available
really like
grant.
you all to have a full conversation on whether that's how you wish to proceed for the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what
That and on the match as well, because we have some thoughts that we went back and went, oh, you know, on the match, if we stay at 4-1, applicants have the opportunity to spread their grants multiple years, coming back in multiple phases. Well, we've seen what's happened with your rejection of folks not getting through their phases.
Right.
Whereas if they had to have a 1-to-1 match and they applied all at one time, they would then have that money in their pocket ready to go to complete a project. With the way construction is going, has been going for the past 2 to 3 years, the costs have gone up exponentially. We've had our own projects that we've got one today that we're coming to talk to you about, a construction issue. And those construction issues continue to happen for cities, nonprofits, local government. So just wanting to frame that for you, that we understand the desire that they would put a lot of cash into a project. But keep in mind that project might not be able to be completed as presented, because even if they had that 4-to-1 match, they still may not have enough if they have to spread it over multiple years. Whereas they could come back more quickly in some ways, but still maybe not finish. I know it's kind of a...
Well, do you, or you, Brad, do you have a recommendation to us relative to this?
We all agree that we think a 1-to-1 match is better. You get that project going right at that time. Because of some of the things that you've already suggested changing in the rules, they have to have their construction documents ready to go. They have to be really ready to go with this project. So if they're coming with an exceptional grant, Mr. Alt's not incorrect. They're going to have been working on this for quite some time. This isn't, a small little project that maybe is $200 or $400 or even $600,000. This is a substantial project. So they're going to have been working on it for a while. So they're hopefully going to be really ready to go, and they're not going to want to spread it over 3 years. So we might get a little bit more bang for our buck right away of implementing some exceptional projects if the 1-to-1 is in place. If it has to be 4-to-1, we already know of one that's told us that they had been preparing because the previous ECHO committee had said 1-to-1. They're not going to be able to move forward with their big project because it would require a 4-to-1. So doesn't mean that that's the way you have to go. That would be our recommendation if you're asking for it.
I see.
I agree with Donna that it should be a 1-to-1. And also, the applicants have always been a government. It's the county or it's a municipality. So they're sustainable.
Yes.
I also agree after hearing from Donna and knowing what's going on this day of this year. I think that the construction issues, I agree with the 1-to-1 now.
Okay. Let me ask you, Jeffrey, in the case of it being a 4-to-1, was I right in your concern that in fact they didn't have a deep enough pocket to potentially meet those commitments over the years?
Correct. If you're building a $20 million project, you need a very strong support system.
Right.
And if you can't, I won't be voting for 1-to-1. When you go down to 1-to-1, you're just saying that the organization doesn't have, you're paying for half of the project. If it's a municipality, they're sustainable. If it's a county, they're sustainable. But when you start talking about nonprofits, if you don't have countywide support, if you don't have that very strong financial base, you're going to have problems.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
I understand. And does in any way the review process and it being in the top 2 of the tier, does that help accommodate your concerns at all?
No, I'm fine with getting rid of that caveat, because then what happens is everybody on the board believes that, okay, I like this project, so I have to score it higher than maybe it should be scored in order.
But you also have the ability to scrutinize that project and say, I think that perhaps they don't have the financial wherewithal to keep with their commitments. And so you could in fact, you could rank it lower. It doesn't pull you to have to rank it high just because it's going through the process as exceptional. It doesn't have to be that way at all.
But if you have a 4-to-1 match, or if we lower it to 3-to-1 match to help out a little bit, you have that money and you've shown, so say you score an 80, well, everybody else, the smaller projects score 95 or a little bit higher. They shouldn't be, the exceptional grant should not be knocked out simply because they're not in the top 2. I don't think the ranking matters that much as making sure they have everything together. And if
Okay.
we have concerns, we express those concerns, but ranking in the top two, was
Well, I
always
think that was
strange.
just a methodology to say whether they're, how exceptional they are and whether, they're exceptional in the ranking itself. But I understand. I understand your concerns. Yes, Don?
So in the application submittals that you all receive, some of you are new, they have to provide to us either bank statements or if they're a local government, a resolution indicating that the money is in the bank for their match. So when you're talking about, further being able to support, it needs to be looked at it from an operating perspective, and those are some questions that are a little harder to answer sometimes.
Right.
But they have to have that money in the bank. Now, we've seen cases where nonprofits have come back to you and said, well, we did have the money, but we don't anymore. But at the time of their meeting in front of you, that money has to be in the bank.
Right. Right.
Do we, on the match, these are projects that are project ready. Does the design dollars count towards the match? They do.
Design dollars. It can.
They can.
Why don't you come up and speak?
Reimbursement.
So design dollars could be counted as previously spent cash, or it could be if it was a contribution, like if a nonprofit, an in-kind contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we lower the match to 1-to-1 for the exceptional grant.
Second.
Okay. Let's have a vote on moving it to a 1-to-1 ratio for exceptional grants. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Okay. 2 opposed.
3-2.
All right, it passes. Let me ask one more thing.
Wait a minute. What was the vote? 3-3?
3-2.
3?
1, 2, 3.
4.
4-2.
4-2.
Oh, it passes.
5,
Okay.
right?
I voted against.
But you voted
Voted
for.
against.
Okay,
I don't know if I might.
I'm making sure.
Maybe, do you need a roll call?
It's a roll call, that's fine.
Yeah, I think so. Stacy Simmons,
Aye.
Pat Patterson,
Aye, yes.
Reggie Santilli,
Aye.
Jack Surratt,
Aye.
Sarah Lee Morrissey,
No.
Jeffrey Alt,
No.
David Romeo.
No.
4-3.
Let me ask this question because it was part of what was there relative to a 1 per lifetime exceptional grant. Is that still in place?
Yes, it's still in the guidebook.
Right. And so,
Unless, as we discussed at the previous meeting, unless it provides a substantial increase or in terms of audience served. And that's described in the guidebook as well.
audience served. Okay. So let me clarify. If the county had a project, okay, that was considered an exceptional grant, they could only do it once?
It's per project, not per
Oh,
organization.
Okay. I see. Okay, so it's a per project basis. So if a project went on,
Yes, sir.
I got you. Okay. Well, thank you. Then it's left in place. We don't have to do anything on that change, it being a lifetime position. Any other?
So that, to clarify that, theoretically, let's use the Museum of Arts and Sciences as a good example. They have a project that is a special building, to house something, right? And then, I don't know, 5 years later, they get a special collection and they want to do another special building just for that collection. How do you interpret that? That a totally different project and they can't have an exceptional grant, or it's a new project and it's eligible?
My understanding of the rules is that would be a new project.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's,
I just want clarification.
yeah, that's the way I would think, but I could see where there can be some confusion,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's an annex to something versus a totally different project. But that's a judgment we would make, I guess.
It would.
Okay.
I'd like to make another motion. I'd like to make a motion that we eliminate the rule that an exceptional grant has to place in the first two spots.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Well, thank you, because I was going to ask, is there any more clarity that you all would need?
On dollar amount.
Can I make another motion?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
I'd like to make it the motion that for an exceptional grant, we raise it to $4 million.
What are we?
Let
What
me
are we
ask you,
thinking our annual allocation is? And I know that will change as property values go up, but right now, where are we on that?
So our annual allocation would be the estimated is 8.2 million per year.
And that 8.2 million would include whatever we want to allocate towards an exceptional grant.
Correct. And you also have a 15 million in reserves.
right, how do we determine how much is dealt with on a year-to-year basis? How much is in the budget year-to-year? How's that determined?
You
So there's all those fun things that government gets to take right off the top. So some of those things would come off the top. CRAs, all those types of things, administrative dollars, very small amount on both of those. But then you've got the trail set aside that you all agreed to and council agreed to. So that's $1.5 million off the top of that. And from that, that's your remaining budget of the year. Now, because you do have additional amount in reserve, if by chance you were to go over, so let's just pretend it was 8 million and you had 2 million that you had to take off the top, so that leaves you 6. If you were to go over $6 million and felt strongly about funding every single project, you would make a recommendation to the county council and say, hey, look, we know we have $15+ million in reserves. This is a special year. We think that we should take $1 million of that to make all of our grant requests whole. So that's what you would do.
I understand.
But we have not gone over 3 million, 3.5 in,
Yeah, as long as.
In total grants in 1 year?
No,
Yes.
yeah, that's, yeah,
That's why-
we've never gotten there.
that's why we've been gaining our reserves.
But let me ask you, when would the reserves ever be tapped?
When you make a recommendation to the county council
No,
that you recommend that they be used.
okay.
I
But
mean,
what-
you could have applications come in that exceed your 6 million for
or
that
8
year.
million.
Easily.
No, you could, and
Especially if you had an exceptional grant.
Yeah.
certainly.
right.
But what I'm saying is that we're holding a much larger budget, so the determination of $6 or $8 million per year, why aren't we making that 9 million and using some of the reserve that you're speaking of? What determines 8 versus
It's what
using some of the
it's
reserves?
taxable value. So like last year, we actually did not have a grant season,
Right.
and they also did not they did not take in the 2 mills,
Right.
which is your maximum amount that the council
Yeah.
can levy on behalf of the ECHO program. So, but what the 8.2 is the maximum that we would probably get in from this current taxable year.
I see. So it's what you project to be getting in that course of that year.
Right. Oh, good.
what's
Somebody
doing it.
handed me a nice little thing here. So 8.2 million was our, with our millage rate of 0.2 mils, miscellaneous revenues of 93,000, and then personal services, operating expenditures, capital outlay takes off about 254. When you take off the 1.5 CRA payment is 235,000, 1.5 million in trails, and then we budget high for ECHO grants,
Right.
4.5 million. But, so that would,
Yeah, I understand. I was a bit confused. The thing that gets me is that we have a reserve, and so I guess the reserve has to be dealt with uniquely. In other words, we have to say, hey, we want to dip into this reserve versus speaking in terms of it going year to year. In other words, beyond what's taxed that year, we
Right.
say, okay, some of that reserve gets plugged in. That's fine.
So in this case, if you thought that you were going to spend, more than you needed to, you would have $15 million in reserves. If you look down at the bottom line here, you got 15,313, you got 15,068, then 16 million at the bottom of the highlighted box is this anticipated budget year, and that's presuming that we would spend $4.5 million in grant funds.
Right.
Okay? So if at any time you get more requests than what you have in your current budget, you can make a recommendation to council. They may or may not agree, but that is totally within your purview, and we would suggest that you do that.
Yeah, and maybe, and do it, and before you get to the review process, I think you just say, we'd like, the budget to be increased, to go into the reserves for this particular thing because we have special projects or
Right.
large projects.
And
I
there may
understand.
be other projects that the council feels have, a countywide impact that they may even say that they, wish to do as well, so.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Ma'am.
If somebody came to us for a grant, maybe it was an exceptional, and they asked for 3, and maybe the top, we didn't have enough money, could we give them like 2, less than they asked for?
You can make that recommendation, yes.
Yeah.
You can choose how you want to do it. You can either do a partial, or if you want to go into reserves and recommend that to council, you could do that as well.
Thank you. Donna, the reserves, is this specific to ECHO or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And I have
Yes, Sarah Lee.
Reggie, can you elaborate a little bit about the 4 million? Like what were you thinking about? If there was something specific or?
Okay, well, at our workshop, Barb Gertman, District 1, made the comment about, we went from 400,000 to 600,000. And then we're only thinking about going from 1.8 to 2.
Okay.
And if it's a project where they have to purchase land or they have to make improvements to it, it's expensive.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to put some
Yeah,
perspective.
1.8 doesn't do much anymore.
And so so $4 million was arbitrary. You didn't pick it based on anything else,
No,
basically. You
just-
said because of costs going up. Let's put it that way.
Well, that and also in relation to what we decided to raise on the regular funds between
Right.
400,000 and 600,000.
Okay, so we have a motion in place to allow exceptional grants to go to $4 million. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Stacy seconds. Let's have a vote.
We have discussion?
Sure.
Once again, my problem, I have no problem going back to 3 million. When you go back to 4 million, if you're doing an exceptional grant, one-to-one match, at $8 million, that is not a responsible decision to recommend to county council that we're going to be spending $4 million, half of a project for a nonprofit, which taxpayers have no ownership in. I don't agree. I don't
Most
agree with
likely
that.
they will have ownership because it'll be a government. You won't be
If it's a government,
not-for-profit.
that's one thing, but if it's a nonprofit, there's no taxpayer saying
No,
how
but
that's
do we
run.
have any nonprofits that would apply for an exceptional grant that high?
I think you could. I mean, I thought, if it was not the joint workshop, but the last meeting when Jeffrey pointed out to us who some of the nonprofits were, when we were discussing, the tiers, I had an aha moment then because I was like, oh my God, I'm not even thinking that way. When I think about a nonprofit, I'm thinking much smaller. And so, I don't necessarily have a problem with the proposal to raise the amount from the 2 million to a higher amount, except that as I'm thinking about the decision that was just made to the 1-to-1, I'm a little troubled without any other type of criteria. I think I would have to agree with Mr. Alt. I'm a little concerned about a 1-to-1 and now we're, I do agree with you. It needs raised. I'm just troubled by pairing that together and then not necessarily having any other criteria that helps define the who or the what. Or,
No, I agree. I mean, it's going from 4-to-1 to 1-to-1. You know, I guess I should have spoke up. I thought it should be 2-to-1, but, and now going from, I think is it 2 or 1.8? 2 million or 1.8? It's 1.8. Okay, okay. And going from 1.8 to 4 is like a yearly, you know, if we figure 8.2 per year, that's 50%. I'm more of looking at it as, you know, look at 1/3, which would be roughly around 2.5 million, which would be a $700,000 increase. And I agree with Barbara pointing that out. I just don't think all the way to 4 million is that's quite large. And I just think it would, maybe not this year, but remember last year we really didn't do any projects. I expect a lot of projects, hopefully. And I think, you know, 4 million, especially since it's going probably to a county or something like that, project is quite large. I would consider 2.5 million somewhere in there to raise it. Reggie, you want to change your motion or?
well, can I ask this question? You know, is there perhaps the possibility of a tiering consideration that if you're going to exceed 2 million, you know, maybe we need to revisit, you know, okay, so it's a 1-to-1 up to 2 million, and maybe we reconsider that ratio if you go higher than whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Just, does it have to be flat all the way across?
Well, I don't know that I think that, broadening the subject, I think we ought to be looking at these different things different ways and customizing it by each part of the ECHO project as has been recommended before by, you know, by Mr. Alt. But to me, I think that creates a new level of complexity that we probably don't need if in fact we can kind of reach a consensus on what we think a larger amount is, and maybe 4 million overshoots what we think, and it should be a lesser amount. But it seems to me that you know, I think the 1-to-1 is a reasonable approach. The question is what's reasonable on the total amount, and we can vote on it based on the motion in place in the second, or you can change your motion.
I don't think we have a second.
Thought you had a second.
I did second,
Yeah, I
but
think it was a second.
actually,
Yeah.
I would consider the 2.5. I do want to rescind my second if possible.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I want to amend the motion from 4 million to 2.5 million
Okay.
amendment. You'll need a
Second?
second.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Reggie. Okay. Let's vote on that. I tell you, because of the nature of this, let's do this by roll call.
Could you restate the motion, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
the motion is that we move it from 1.8 on an exceptional grant for a 1-to-1 match to a 2.5 total for an exceptional grant on a 1-to-1 ratio.
David Romeo,
Hit me.
Yes.
Jeffrey Alt,
Yes.
Sarah Lee Morrissey,
Yes.
Jack Surratt,
Yes.
Reggie Santilli,
Yes.
Pat Patterson,
Yes.
Stacy Simons.
Yes.
Great. What I was going to say is you make these rules. If you start going through cycles and these rules aren't working, you can change the rules if you need to. And obviously you'd have a lot of thought. You know, something to think about, you know, you've made this decision, hopefully we'll, you know, move on to the next item here. But, you know, maybe if you are going to entertain these exceptional grants, since we've changed the amounts and the matches potentially palatable to those that are applying, maybe we do ask them to come in advance. So that if there's some kind of concern and an agency says, but I have a $15 million project and I, you know, so that maybe it can be an ongoing discussion rather than these are hard, fast rules, because there may be a time when you go, wow, not only is this, regional, this is going to bring people from greater than Volusia County because it's such a wow project. So just keep that in mind as you're going forward. These are not set in cement. You have created these rules. You'll, have the blessing of the council, but you can always make recommendations to change them as you see fit.
Okay. I guess we've exhausted that subject. And maybe not.
So the next thing then we need to, in the guidebook, there's a cap of 2.4 million. So previously, for one project, you could apply for an exceptional and another 600,000. So that was the cap. Now that you've moved it to 2.5, there needs to be some discussion on what the cap will be per project. So if you'd like to continue with the having them be able to apply for a 2.5 million exceptional and one standard, which would be 600, that would be 3.1.
Take that motion.
Yeah.
You're on fire
Can
here.
apply for a regular grant in addition to the exceptional. Would it be the same year? No, in
That's what they currently do.
It would be lifetime
lifetime.
for the project.
Okay. For another grant.
So essentially, it's
To
600,000. It's 600,000 on top of the amount we were proposing at 2.5.
Yes, sir.
And that's how it currently is, correct? 1.8 and then 6. All right, okay.
Okay. All right, we have a motion.
I'll second it.
Sarah Lee, seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Unanimously approved. Okay. We got it, right? Nope. Donna's up.
Tag team.
Oh, and really good news. We just made an offer for our new ECHO staff activity project manager this morning, so we're very excited. At the next meeting, she'll get dunked in the booth and we'll throw things at her. So anyway, so our staff is continuing to grow. Undisturbed use discussion. I know you all had a lengthy discussion. I was not there. Brad was by himself. Carmen wasn't available. None of us were available to give you a little bit of history on why we had strongly recommended the 20 versus 25. For those of you that were on the committee previously, you all had suggested 20 years. And the reason why is because when these projects come to us for a grant, they currently have to show 40 years, correct? 40 years from this point in time of undisturbed use. Well, that doesn't work well for a lot of people if they have a lease with the state of Florida. The state of Florida in many cases is unwilling to renegotiate a lease until we're very close to the end of it. So, for example, the Marine Science Center in Volusia County does not have enough time on the books. So they would not be able to apply for funding through this process. And so it has caused them not to apply for the past couple of years, and we've been waiting for that change. We would strongly recommend that you move to 20 years. If for some reason you have questions about the grant to begin with, that will come up in your discussions, but we've got quite a few things here. And not only that, but the process with renegotiating a lease with the state of Florida is lengthy. It's not something that you can accomplish very quickly. We had the DeBerry Gateway Park just not too long ago that got something in at the very, very last minute from the state. And we knew it was coming, and you all, the previous board 2 years ago, had agreed to, okay, if they get it in by the time it goes to council, we'll be fine. And it did barely make it. So anyway, we would request that if you would be so kind.
How did we leave that? Was that subject tabled last time?
No, sir. You recommended 25 years.
Oh.
But Brad was unaware, new guy on the street, didn't know of the history there. So, and neither of us were here to share that historic information of the struggles that those organizations have had coming
Really,
before you.
it's really connected to the state of Florida's position at 20 years.
Yes.
Right, I understand.
As
Yes,
someone
Stacey.
who's had to work with the state of Florida on its leases, I totally understand. I'm fine.
Yes, Stacy.
Thank you for another perspective, and maybe because I'm new on the board, a clarification. So, for example, Seabreeze United Church. It's a church that has historical recognition, I believe is the category. They're hesitant to apply because they don't know if they'll be operational for the period of 25 years. So another example maybe of a possibility that would disclude a historic project coming forward. Do you have
Right.
any information about that, or have they ever applied?
I don't know.
To my knowledge, they have not applied.
I
I think that would
share
be-
the question, and it's something I've been thinking about, although I view that more as applicant eligibility.
Right,
And,
because they own it, right? And they're wanting, the church itself owns its own building.
I'm kind of,
I would assume that the church organization owns the building and that they would be the applicant requesting for a historic,
say it's a historic renovation.
right.
Right.
So we would anticipate then that they would, if this rule was in place, that would have public access for 20 years.
but if something happened and the church no longer existed as a church,
That would
just
still
kind of
encompass-
curious.
They could apply for it to be another use. We've had those things happen.
Oh.
So if they wanted to use it as a historic landmark and have tours of the history of that area or the history of the church as a whole,
Or a future owner would have to do that because
they would have to take on,
it's an encumbrance on the property.
correct. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Yeah, so they would be eligible. They just need to commit initially for that 20 years.
Thank you.
Any motion?
Is this something that we can provide or do exceptions on an individual basis if they come to us? Because like these projects are very worthy projects. I'm just worried about reducing that length of time for as a blanket on everybody.
Well, I suppose they could be done on a customized basis. I think one way we could do it too is if we looked at whether it be, an ecological or cultural basis and break that up, and there may be varying degrees. But to me, one of the central points is that connected to the state. And that, to me, I don't like that deterrent to projects. When we're talking about 20 years of access, it's pretty substantial. And to say, we should keep it at 25 because we want to make sure that access is there, knowing that negates projects based on the state's requirements, I think it's more reasonable to move to 20. But I would love to see a more customized approach by each of these various segments of ECHO.
Okay, so my only response to that is in 2 years, Sugar Mill Historic Site will be under 20 years. DeBerry Gateway Park will also be under 20 years. So we're sort of just, this problem is going to come up again just in a few years.
The problem could come up tomorrow. I mean, if it's a project being proposed, right?
This is for the application process.
Right.
So yes, they are going to have to renew their leases with whoever their leaseholder is. But it doesn't, other than us monitoring and ensuring that they're at least working towards a lease process, it doesn't impact the grant funding that we've provided to them unless for some reason the state revokes their lease. That's not really their fault if that has happened unless they've done something to incur that. The only concern that I would have, and legal really needs to weigh in about whether we could be flexible here, is that we need to let people know what the requirement is. If we have, we think we're at 25, but if you have something different, let us know. They may not apply. And I think one of the things that I heard from you all is that you really want to encourage people to apply for the program. So if you keep it at 25, that's fine. We just need to know that we're keeping it at 25 and let them know that it's going to be a while before they could apply. If you want to do it at 20, that's fine too. Keep in mind, as long as we're having undisturbed use discussions, your staff will be having to monitor all of these grants for all of these years as well. I will be retired in 6.5 years, so it won't be me. And others will be falling behind. So you will have ECHO staff in perpetuity that will be monitoring these sites as for the length of time that as part of their original agreement, which in most cases is 40 years. Started at 40.
Brad's a young man. Well, I would like to make a motion to go to 20 years.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of going to 20 years for undisturbed lifetime access, vote aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. We're moving through the agenda. You're jumping right along. That's great. Okay. Now it says ECHO Guidebook Final Review. Are we going to go through that page by page?
No, sir. But this is, we shared with you, and as you could see in the documents, I highlighted the recommended changes that you approved.
Right.
And this is a time to give us any feedback before we propose your recommendations to council.
I want to talk about something, but it's not part of the changes, but I'd like some better understanding as to the why, and perhaps in the future, if we're going to revisit these, which it sounds like, we want to have more ongoing review. So can I just jump in and do that? It's
Jump
a
in.
little out of.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, don't.
I wanted to talk about applicant eligibility, because I can think of a couple of situations where I'm concerned the project might be good, but the applicant eligibility is problematic. And so I'm looking at Tim Bailey because I know you're going to understand at least one of these. So one of my concerns is with historic renovations, rehabilitation. And I thought Stacy's question was a good one about a church. And I've also been in a situation at least twice where I, in a former life, have school buildings that are absolutely historic and not enough money to address the issues. And, I'd like to understand the why on if a facility can be made available to the public, why is the curriculum aspect an automatic ineligibility?
Well, I'm not sure I understand. What do you
Well,
mean?
and maybe I didn't follow the initial, when we had our orientation.
Curriculum.
Yeah, if somebody's providing operation or curriculum during the day, right? And the during the day activity is student-based and it's curriculum-based, they are ineligible. But,
Okay.
so and that relates to another use as well, which is.
So are you referring to the school board's ineligibility to apply? It's because you're a taxing it's because the school board is a taxing district.
But municipal government is a taxing district.
Understood. That was the rule that were put in place by the council a long time ago. If that's something that you would like to recommend to council that they discuss, I don't know.
Well, I'm
Mr.
wanting
Dyack.
to understand the why right now. I'm not saying I want to recommend that, but I want to understand the why, because I didn't see it in our resolution that went to the voters. So,
Yeah, it's not part of the resolution. It's
Okay.
part of the documentation.
So I'm going to go way back in time when the ECHO grant, first of all, Tim Bailey, Volusia County Parks, Recreation, and Culture. The spirit of what they were looking for, when they had originally put the 2/10 of a mil together. They wanted to make sure that those funds were distributed, and they were concerned that the school board might be a big user of those funds, and then other entities would be wiped out, right? Now, early on, there were a couple years where there were more applicants than money. So the last applicant score, the lowest score, was getting a partial grant, right? Now, fast forward to today, you're really not seeing that. You have pretty much as much ECHO dollars as you need to fund the applicants, right? So if you wanted to venture into that, you know, one, I don't know, Mike can weigh in on that, but there might be the spirit behind that was they wanted to make sure that they're distributing the funds and not
Okay.
just to the school board.
And I
Right?
appreciate that
Because
side of it.
they're a big player, big money, big player.
Yeah.
But-
My other thought along those lines and was not so much historic, right? But stay up there, Tim, because you'll understand this one. But a specific example, and I'm trying to think, so how could this happen? It doesn't look like it could happen. University High School, right? In the past life, City of DeBerry, City of Orange City, they want to build a better fields, stadium,
Yeah.
right, on that property.
Yeah.
That property is school board property. And they want to do that in order to have more use, right? I don't see how that's eligible. Now, that's recreation, and I know you all have funded lights and, you know, so.
We'd have to figure that out.
We'd have to look into it, but I would think that the school board could lease it to the cities in a long-term lease for the,
So
For the-
in a previous life, you know, that's always gone south because ultimately you have a maintenance responsibility.
well, I'm telling you what the potential option would be.
Yeah.
So,
But what I'm saying is I'm thinking about these uses and activities and I'm wanting to understand the why on they're not eligible. And I think I understand where you're coming from. I don't know if I would agree.
uses
if it-
themselves are not so much the problem. So if you're wanting a sports complex that has a regional impact, if you're wanting some of those uses, the problem comes with who's the applicant and who is going to be requesting the match dollars.
I am
That's
not
what we get at.
suggesting a change right now, but perhaps in the future, that should be something we have a more thorough conversation about.
And actually, Tim has been in conversation with the cities in Southwest Volusia, and you'll probably be seeing something actually coming from the county of Volusia that addresses part of that, but it doesn't address the high school issue, but it addresses, it's a huge, huge need for recreation.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, my request to speak button wasn't working. I think Donna turned it off. And, you know, Sarah Lee raises a good question. You know, it's on page 18, actually, of the guidebook, I think was what she's referring to. And it looks the way it is written, it's really, it seems like the limitations based on public access. And that it's and I know this is a discussion for another day, but you know, projects that ultimately allow access only to the exterior of a building are ineligible. These include projects intended primarily for students, faculty, and staff, and/or that are intended to augment or supplement a curriculum. This next one, I was thinking, playing fields, athletic facilities come to mind. Projects on multi-use campuses and complexes with no designated parking. So it seems like it's possible that those types of facilities could be eligible if the public access issue was addressed, at least the way this was written. Tim, I don't know if this was changed over time or it's probably the same.
I think there's some language in there that makes the school board ineligible. So if the school board would be the applicant, they would not be eligible. Is that, and Brad, isn't that?
And I could get that piece, but if it was board owned, but joint, what is other
Yeah.
community players, you know, which I think they can work on.
So I think where you're heading, it'd be another funding source potentially for the school board to create maybe a better sports complex with additional monies from Echo, with the access to the public after school hours and after school's use. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, on that one, but I there were two comments with the historic and a third-party leaseholder, right? And where the monies were the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because historic renovation is expensive, no matter what you're looking at.
Yep.
Well, I think your point's a good one and worth consideration in the future. I think the reason to say, okay, they're a big use of the money, that's interesting to me, and I appreciate you providing that insight, because I can see them being a large use of the funding. Perhaps this could fit, though, as we customize to some of these things, we could actually incorporate that in some fashion to where we would have the flexibility of dealing with it in some way. I'm not sure, but it seems like a good thing in many cases. But what we don't want is the schools to, with all their needs, to consume all of the funds. Yes, Jeff.
I just want to add that I agree with you. I think this is a topic we should really discuss next year. Complaints have been that we don't fund the schools because that's not their primary purpose. But I want to point out that we have plenty of grants for Stetson University, Bethune-Cookman, and Daytona State College.
Yes, but I tell you, at least in the case of Stetson, which I was on the edge of, part of it does go to public access. It can't just be students, and you end up with this discussion about whether the public, in fact, can be a participant versus just students alone. So there is a public access issue when you're dealing with a student body, whether it be regular schools or other institutions. But I hear you. You're right.
I just want to add on to that. Jill has been very, very helpful to me. I've been reviewing a lot of old grants and the annual reports that come in. The Lively Arts Center, when that was built, the nonprofit unfortunately went out of business, and the facility was turned over to Daytona State College. Now that facility is still an Echo facility, even though it's run by Daytona State College. Well, if you look at the grant and you look at the projections of what the numbers they should be drawing, it was projected to serve approximately 100,000 people a year. And with a 900-seat theater, a 250-seat theater, classrooms, galleries, that number is easily achievable. However, on their annual report, they serve a total of 17,500 people. There's a disconnect there. And that's one of the reasons, too, why I talk about we really have to reformat these annual reports so we get a clear understanding of what projects have been successful and what projects need to be pushed along a little bit, and said, how can we get these numbers up? Because that building is still an Echo building. And if that was run properly, Beach Street would be an entirely different story. And if I'm a Volusia County council member on the east side, or if I'm with the Daytona City Council and I'm looking at trying to improve the area, we have an Echo building there that could help out.
Okay. Anything else, Sarah Lee, on the book itself?
No,
Okay. Yes. Sorry, Stacy.
I just wanted to comment that I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I think it's a very good guide for applicants coming in, very professional, and I just wanted to commend you. Good job.
Let me add to that. Not only is it a good job, it's a big improvement from where we were, because I remember going through the book initially, and where we stand today with this is a much better method to tell an applicant how to approach it, and I think it promotes more application versus the other one, which was it needed a lot of work to get through it, and it was hard. So you deserve congratulations on it. Okay, let's.
So
I guess
to confirm on page 19, will that change from 25 to 20 now? Yeah, okay.
Any other thing on the guidebook where anybody has a comment? I mean, we did go through all these things. You just put them in writing and put them in the book, and I don't think we need to go through it by page. I feel pretty comfortable with it. Do you need you need us a motion to confirm it, or are we just moving on? Okay, I like that. All right, let us move on. Let's move to new business. The City of Holly Hill and their Pictonia request. Yes, Brad.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if we could have Tim Bailey go first with his extension request. Mr. Forte's on his way to present for the City of Holly Hill. Jill, if you'll pull Mr. Bailey's presentation up, please.
Good afternoon again, Tim Bailey, Volusia County Parks, Recreation, and Culture Director. What I wanted to do is tell you why I'm asking for this extension. So I put together some pictures. You can see here of the site itself, and then I'm going to tell you what's going on with it. So this is the boat ramp. For those of you that are not aware of Lemon Bluff boat ramp, it's just north of 415. If you go east on Lemon Bluff, it'll dead end right, well, not dead end, but it'll get you to the river. And so this what you're seeing before you would be on the east side of Lemon Bluff, accessing the St. Johns River. So those two docks on either side of the gangway there are floating docks, and then there are two concrete pilings that are securing that floating dock to the walkway. And I just want you to think about where they're at as I go into the presentation, because that's kind of what caused the problem that we got going on right now. This is another viewpoint of that floating dock. And for those of you that are not aware, when St. Johns River gets high, the docks are underwater. And so we built these in such a way where they will not be underwater, and they will be able to be used in high tide conditions. Just in a picture of the border walls that separate the park from the local resident, that's all completed. And this is the decking that the pole is, and the decking would need to be added to that. And that's less than a week's worth of work, so that's not really what's holding us up. So, and then there's the opposite side. This is the problem that I wanted to bring up. So if you can see those uprights, that's the handrail of the walkway leading down to those floating docks. And you'll see the separation of the seawall cap to that handrail is about, say, 4 or 5 inches. And then if your eye can carry you down to the next third or fourth pole, you'll see that seawall cap now is touching the 6x6 upright pole. Do you all see that? Mm-hmm. So what happened there is that seawall has drifted in and is not plumb. And so what caused that was when they were driving the pilings in for that floating dock, it compromised that seawall cap. And it's not an engineering issue. The core bore samples came up clean. It was the timing of the conditions of the property at the time that they're boring those in there. And so we've got to solve that problem. So we have tried a couple of different things. One thing that we've tried is a helix, where it's a tie back into the seawall, and it bores into the dirt, and then the goal was to pull that wall back to flush. That was not did not work. And so we're looking at an alternative to solve that problem. Both the engineers, which is Dredging Marine Consultants, and the construction staff team, Volusia County construction team, as well as the developer or Sabungi Construction, are working on solving that problem. So what I'm asking for today is an extension for us to solve that problem. You know, someone could say, well, that wall may not move again, right? Someone could say that, and we'd be moving on. But we don't know that for sure. We want to fix it. We want to make it flush. We want to make it right. And so it's just going to take us a little more time to do that.
Let me ask a silly question. Isn't it odd that it pulled away versus pushed further?
Well, on the other side of that seawall is all
Yes.
the dirt.
Okay.
So from a engineering standpoint, the push was out. The push wasn't in.
Okay.
So, and the other side of that is the boat ramp itself. So you got the dirt up here, boat ramp down here, seawall.
Are there tiebacks like Deadman in this?
There are. That's correct.
Well,
Yep, there are.
I'm not sure I can do this as an interim chair, but I move to accept the time extension of 6 months for the Lemon Bluff project, 1607.
Yes, sir. You will have to have
I'll have to have someone else do that.
But before we leave that, sorry, I just wanted to show you the rest of the site. I'm a little
I'm sorry.
excited about the site. It's a great, you know, when it's done, this is going to be a great asset to the community. This area is one of the few boat launches in Volusia County to this area, the St. John's. So, and everything else is almost complete, right? It might not look that way, but a lot of the infrastructure's in. All we're looking at is grading, landscaping, a little details here, and then the park will be done. That's the seawall facing the St. John's River, and there's the pavilions in the background there. And then that's the parking lot right across the street with the street lights right there on the forefront. And I think that's it, right? Okay.
Can
Thank
people
you.
use that boat ramp now?
Sorry?
Can people use
Cannot.
that? Okay.
Yeah,
it's-
yeah, the
close off.
liability, the contractor still owns the liability. There's boards, there's every, it's secured, yeah.
Yeah.
There is a smaller boat launch right down the street that they can use.
Okay.
Yes, Stacy.
Tim, if I may, I know these things happen. It's just part of construction. Have you lost any faith in your construction selection for the company going forward? Do you have any hesitations with sticking with the plan?
So we have worked, Sabungi has done a variety of projects for the county. So, and they were a little better by a significant portion. So, I don't think it was a contractor construction issue. It was just one of those Mother Nature kind of things at the time.
Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. I'm sorry, Pat.
how much time do you want on this?
So I think 6 months is going to be fine.
Mr. Chair, move approval to extend the ECHO Grant 16.07 for 6 months.
I second. All those that approve, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I see Mr. Forte has arrived.
I have whatever I had submitted. Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I need to thank Carmen for calling me because Brad had sent me an email and I put it on my calendar for August 22nd. So I made it here, I guess, just in time.
Yeah.
So I have two requests. The first request is a modification to the Hollyland Park Modernization Grant, which is 0402, which was part of the original grant at Hollyland Park, which we vacated part of that during Pictona Phase 1. And now that we're looking to expand onto what's called Field 4, I'm looking to request a modification to that grant again. That grant, what was remaining on that grant, still has some shade structures, some bleachers, and the road that comes in off of 10th Street into the park was part of that grant. So at this time, I'm asking a modification to that to allow us to, basically, we're going to repurpose all of that. The shade structures and the bleachers will be reincorporated into the second phase of Pictona, and the road will be moved to allow for a better road, a wider road, and also accommodate about 60 parking spaces. So that's really my first request. And oddly enough, I'm a whole lot better at begging for forgiveness than asking for permission. And in this case, I'm kind of asking for permission in advance of what's going to be a change. If you remember, during Pictona, we had to come back and ask for that after we had already started. So I'm here to you now to let you know that we're moving forward with Phase 2 and requesting a modification to that grant.
Let me ask a question. In the case of the change on the first one, so essentially part of Phase 2 will be consuming the space on the adjustment of of what you're calling a modernization.
The modernization was what the grant was called back at that time. That's
Right,
correct.
and so basically that space, if you will, is
Correct.
being consumed by Phase 2 of Pictona.
That's correct.
Okay.
Does that first request really go back to '04?
That's when that grant was, well, actually, it might have even been prior to, but yeah, that request goes back to 2004.
And completed, right? It's just that you're changing it now, that's why you're here. Yeah, long gone.
Long gone. So what we're doing is, there are items that are covered under that ECHO grant that ECHO paid for that still exist. So because we're going to change them or move them, I have to come back and ask you to allow me to do that.
This is
Oh,
a change.
I'm
See what I mean?
sorry.
Change over time.
Okay,
That's right.
Yeah. I'm asking for a
Oh.
modification to an old grant.
Right. It's,
I got it. I was sitting there thinking you hadn't finished yet. And yeah.
No.
that would have
Like, are
been,
you kidding?
I wouldn't have drove here for that.
yeah, that would have been a bad reflection.
Got it.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion on the first part?
What is the time limit? What are they-
No, no, I'm not. I'm speaking in terms of the adjustment to the original.
You're all anxiously waiting for my next brief.
Yeah, it's
So I can make a motion
yes, Stacy.
to, let's
Oh.
see, how can I state this? I make a motion to allow, help me here,
Yeah, you're basically a scope change, all right?
to allow the change to the original completed project to be incorporated in the new request.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, approved unanimously. Now we get to the.
Now we get to the fun
big
part.
one. Yeah.
So, as I mentioned in one of the previous meetings, and I got to watch your work session with the council last week, so I know you're a little bit familiar with it. But Pictona, as you know, is a 24-court pickleball facility in Holly Hill that was constructed in a public-private partnership between the Martins Charities, the City of Holly Hill, and an ECHO grant. This is a unique project where I think it's one of the only projects where you have a public-private partnership where the private sector received nothing and the public sector, the city, owns all of the assets down to the furniture inside the building. So it truly is a public-private partnership to the benefit of the public. It's been so successful that we want to expand to Phase 2, which will add 24 more courts, and one championship court will be under a steel structure just like the 8 courts that are on Phase 1. Part of that expansion and that championship court will also make it available for local performances, whether it's music, entertainment, arts and crafts shows. Somebody may want to host a wedding over there. It'll have seating capacity for between 1,000 and 1,200 people in the stands and another couple hundred people in what are considered like the box seats, that kind of made out of PVC pipe for closer seating. So where we are right now is we've completed the design, the engineering is done, the architectural work is done, we're ready to go out to start getting pricing on this. Pricing is going up 8% a month, especially on steel, so the price is getting higher and higher. In the information that I had sent, and I'm not sure if you have it or not, we've already reverse engineered and reduced the size of that shade structure a little bit because the costs have been getting so high. The cost on this shade structure is almost double what the cost on the shade structure was at the other building. So I'm coming to you to ask you to allow us to begin the construction of this project before the notice to proceed or even the approval is given by the county council at hopefully what would be a recommendation. So what my ask is to allow us to go ahead and submit an application that will stand on its own merits. The four corners of the application will still go through the process, the staff review, the committee's review, and receive a ranking. And if it ranks, if it's so lucky to be ranked, that we will go ahead and allow it to go through the process, even though we will be starting our project in September, which is probably before you'll even get your applications in. And this wouldn't be a problem had we had an application cycle last year. So I don't want to confuse anybody in the public thinking that we came up with this project, we started it, and then we thought, hey, let's go after some county money. That's not the case. This has been well planned, well anticipated. It is a successful project. We've completed the last one in about a year's time, way ahead of schedule. And this project, they're planning to start in September and complete in September because there's a major national tournament that takes place in California. In order to play in that tournament, you have to have a ranking. You have to be so good to qualify to get into that tournament. So in order to get into that tournament, you have to play at another tournament to get your ranking. Well, that tournament's going to be held at Holly Hill in December of 22. That's why we can't slow this down. This has to be done by September so that we can plan for that tournament in December so that those folks can qualify for the major national tournament in California. That's why we're on this tight time frame.
Gotcha. Let me ask the staff if something like this has ever happened before.
It's Joe, so no. It has not happened before, to my knowledge. Now, there have been council direct expenditures that have been outside the process, but this hasn't happened before. One of the concerns that we have is that this is a reimbursement grant. However, they're planning on spending $4 million, and this is $400,000 of that $4 million. So if they began, you would still need to request, a waiver to council at your recommendation that you think it's a worthwhile extension of a project that's already, going on. And then we would only reimburse them for expenses after the grant was signed and approved by council.
And so they're willing to take the risk.
I think they're willing to take the risk.
Right.
Yeah, and let me just expand on that a little bit. One of the questions you might ask is, well, what if you don't get the ECHO grant? Well, the city through the CRA is contributing money, and the Martins are putting money in. This grant would go specifically toward the construction of the championship court that would also be used for performances. It would be directly related to that, so we'll produce the receipts that show that $1 million expense, that's what the ECHO money is going to go for. So if there are, I don't want to say money's left over, but if we're within the budget, including the ECHO grant, the Martins have committed to adding more to the project. So I don't want you to think that it's a take. These folks are such givers that they said they'll go to the next step, which may be putting a walking path around the entire park to enhance it even further. So the money that ECHO would provide would go to the championship court, and any monies within that $4 million they would put toward other amenities to the park.
Let me ask another question. It's a terrific facility. It's crazy, and I think you were top ranked in the review of 2 years ago.
We were.
Okay.
Yes.
And in the case of things other than pickleball, does this reduce in any way those other functions as recreational activities? Because I know it goes beyond the pickleball itself.
Right. So phase one has other activities like bocce, horseshoes, croquet, cornhole. It's got the community gardens. That was all what ECHO funded the last time. This next phase it's being designed to be a world-class education facility for pickleball. The structure will be a place where people come from all over the United States and even be people from outside this country to come here and learn how to coach, administer similar facilities where they live, referees, and instructors. So it'll be an educational facility. It'll be designed for youth, to bring youth in there to get them to learn how to play pickleball. So so it's not going to take away from phase one. In fact, it's designed to keep phase one intact so that when we bring these programs in, they're done at phase two so that the members and the players at phase one still have their facility available.
Terrific. Thank you.
So let me get this straight. We would be making a motion basically to re-recognize that this will be coming on. It's not a surprise to anyone. Is that what we're basically being asked?
It's a waiver to the process, right? It's a waiver to.
I think what I'm asking is to allow us to submit an application on its own merit and not hold against us that the project has started.
Right.
Right.
So
It'd be a waiver along the lines of what just Mr. Forte just said.
Okay.
So it'd be a motion to make a recommendation to the county council and let them make the decision? Is that right?
Us.
I don't think so. I think
It would come to us first.
Yeah.
It's a waiver to allow him to apply for
right.
ECHO funds.
Right.
If you all decided that he, or the city project should go forward, then you would go ahead and recommend to the county council this time. But because he's asking to not follow the process, because current projects already in the works, can't apply. You can make a decision and waive and allow him to be able to apply through the normal process, and then you'd make a recommendation after that if you decide that it's worthy of funding to move forward to council.
So the request to us, what we decide here is about the application process that is coming soon.
Yeah, that we allow him to
That
apply.
we, the advisory board, recognize it. He doesn't need anything from council at this point.
Correct.
That's correct.
That's right.
Okay. And I don't know that this is relevant to the motion, but are you applying for an exceptional grant or just the standard, standard?
Standard grant.
So it definitely meets the criteria that you all were
I
discussing.
know, that's
earlier.
why I'm kind of like asking that question.
I'm asking,
Grant without the price tag.
Yeah.
It's just an exception to the way we
Yeah,
normally
but-
do
not
it.
an exceptional grant, it's an
But it's not an
exception
exceptional
to your process.
grant.
No, I,
Because it's already started.
is an exceptional
It is an
project
exceptional
that
project,
would,
for sure.
in my opinion, qualify.
It could.
I'll make a motion unless somebody, did you already start, Stacy?
You
Okay,
go for it.
I'll make a motion. My motion is to allow City of Holly Hill Pictona Phase 2 grant application to come forward during the normal application process, acknowledging that the project may have started construction prior to grant submittal and/or grant approval.
I second that.
Okay, we have a
Is that
motion.
worded
and-
correctly? All right.
We have a
good
motion
job.
and a second? Yeah. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Pat? Okay, we have one in opposition. Everyone else is agreeable.
Mr. Forte, I would just like to say that this project, Phase 1, Phase 2, Pictona by itself, is the gem that will absolutely change all that you have worked so hard on in Holly Hill. You know, and we make these little steps and it takes 20 to 30 years.
Right.
This is,
Thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a big deal.
mhm.
I think it's a big deal for Holly Hill. I think it's a big deal for the surrounding area and all of Volusia County.
Oh, yeah. It's going to, between what's happening now with housing values
Yeah.
and the interest now in your community because of this facility.
It's working.
Mhm.
Well,
Thank you very
thank you
much.
so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to, as a point of just follow up from our workshop, and Mr. Romeo, you had suggested, that we heard at the listening sessions from some other municipalities that may have had shovel-ready projects, and we did reach out to them, if they would like to be considered as well, and they're fine with our timeline as we've presented. So I wanted to share that with the committee as well.
What other projects were those?
So we had the city of DeBerry at our listening session said they had one that was ready to go. So we reached out, and the communication was they had reallocated that to another project, but come the fiscal year October 1 to coincide with our timeline would be fine for them.
I do think, though, whenever the applications come before us, and if the Pictona project is in fact one of the applications, I think if the committee ends up feeling it qualifies in all other ways, we are going to have to acknowledge this unusual and unique circumstance, because, and I think we talked about this in the joint workshop, you really don't want to start a precedent on this sort of thing. And this project is unique in a number of ways, but I think it's going to have to be acknowledged if in fact the grant application gets approved.
Agreed. Okay. Well, let's, I guess that's it for the new business. Let's move to the tentative timeline, and I had a question relative to the tentative timeline. I guess that is part of new business. Was there a declaration ever made relative to the number of absences which were acceptable?
So we're missing, we have one more item in new business, which is the planning, the needs analysis and goals discussion. So if you don't mind, we'd like some consensus on purpose for staff. So I'll read what the motion was at our previous meeting: is have staff develop a master plan to show areas or projects of interest, of interest. And so we just need some direction on consensus, or some consensus on purpose, so we can make sure that that motion and your wishes come to fruition. So we just need some staff direction.
On purpose?
On purpose and, purpose of the plan.
Okay. And would that go, because the goals discussion could be quite different than that, right?
They can be two separate, correct?
Right. Well, I can tell you my impression relative to the planning, and it's not particularly to a planning document as it is to planning in general, is to try to be more balanced both regionally and within the ECHO categories, and identify particular projects that facilitate that balance. That's my view, and I'm not sure what other views, but that would be the design of the planning effort. Go ahead.
Are you talking about like what I spoke about at the last meeting here, the goals for where he spoke about a need survey and long-term planning?
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to ask for clarification? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the reasons I had spoken about that as a goal is because I know we don't have time to do that now. Last week, Orange County released, their state of arts and culture report. They are embarking on a 2-year plan to do a 30-year strategic plan for arts and culture. It's going to take 2 years to complete. But yeah, they're doing a need survey. They're doing an assessment of what they currently have in terms of theaters, museums, all of that stuff, and where do we want to be in 30 years. When we started the listening sessions, I was hoping to try and get a vision for 2040. That's what I think we need to do next spring. I don't think I was trying to push the staff into trying to come up with this on their own and bringing something back to us. I think that once we get through our sessions this fall, when we reconvene next January, we need to have these goals in mind, even to address ECH&O on an individual basis. That's going to take some work.
No doubt, but maybe this is, we're only setting the goals, we're not taking on that as a final. And aren't we obligated to do the goals here at some stage in the course of this year, in a general sense? Because I agree, none of this is going to happen right now, but those goals would be for the next year. So we'd be saying, okay, we want to next year address these different subjects, create the goals, and then move forward towards those goals. And the same thing fits within the planning element. Clearly, it's not, that would be one of the goals, if you will. It's funny because I thought at some stage there would be a goals discussion, just like we had before, because we basically tabled it and we said, okay, we're going to look at goals, and here are the 4 goals going forward. And it wasn't here, and so I'm not sure we're prepared to get down to what those goals would be for next year right now. But perhaps you could propose some of these goals based on our discussion and our interests, and the next time we even have a meeting, and it does not have to be next year, we could hammer out the goals themselves based on your suggestions, based on our thoughts, and then put it down to, do we say, okay, I'd like to add a goal, and we have 5 goals, and we determine that in our next meeting where we all get together.
And I think if there's consensus from the board, I think that the direction is that we can poll everyone and ask their goals, ask what their goals would be, and when we come back together, we have a plan from staff as to do some of this needs assessment work. That's the first step before a plan. Mm-hmm. Is everyone in agreement on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Well, and I think those kind of discussions probably need to be in a meeting of this committee or in a workshop rather than individual meetings.
Can I ask, what's the calendar for next year? Because usually the grants are applied and we're hearing them in January or February.
That's right.
So we moved that up.
Right.
What's the calendar for next year? Are we going to keep the fall schedule?
It hasn't been set yet. You can work as a team to set that up. So this slide's just a little confusing, and we kind of reworked it and had different opinions about really what this meant. So at the workshop with council, Mr. Surratt and I think some others talked about wanting to do this master planning, where we go out and ask the community what they want, but then also say, here's the hole, somebody needs to do it, and go out and actively recruit. It's not really been a practice ever or a role that we have filled. So what we were trying to really get at is, what is your goal in this planning process, so that we can better support what that planning process might look like? Because we will need to go back and talk to, senior leadership and the council if we're going to be creating a master plan for which we haven't ever anticipated doing. So that's what we really meant here, not the annual goals discussion, which is an annual report that has to go to council, which is, pretty much the same goals, and you tweak them here and there, and then say what you're going to accomplish.
Well, I'm not sure they'd be the same goals. I think the goals, I think those goals will be very different. But let me mention this, and your point about an individual actually going out was really a small part of what I was intending. What I'm trying to do is deal with a plan in total that could potentially identify projects, and once projects may be identified, then in fact a person could go there and ask whether they want to be a part of it, or suggest to a nonprofit that something comes from that. But to me, a master plan is far more than an individual knocking on doors. That's just one aspect of it. And by the way, it is something that's been within the Volusia Forever program in its early stages. And so I think
actually, well, we can have a separate conversation about Volusia Forever. That's a little bit different. There is a specific area, because the state set it aside, that we also adopted, where if there is a willing seller, they contact us and let us know that they'd like to sell their property.
Yes.
However, keep in mind that this is an advisory board to the county council. So if there's going to be a master plan, we need to find out that they want a master plan and that they would be willing to adopt such a master plan if recommended to them. So I think we probably maybe need to have another workshop that talks about, not necessarily with them first, but with you all having some good fluid discussion on what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish by this planning process. And, maybe there's some of it that we look at now and, take that bit by bit to the council to see, what their temperature is on moving forward in a planning process.
Certainly. Yes.
So I think kind of what I'm getting at here, and maybe this is the avenue they were looking at, there was discussion of what staff expectations were. And I think maybe that's premature, that later on in the future we can look at some outreach efforts similar to what you're discussing. But I feel like just the sheer fact that you help with applications that come in is a daunting task in itself. And I think that's a very good use of your time. I don't know if that's already structured or if that's something that we need to add as a goal discussion. That makes sense. Thank you.
I have mixed feelings about the master plan. I like the idea of a gap analysis, which is kind of a needs analysis. My concern, and this is, some of this is semantics, quite frankly, but the county adopting a master plan concerns me a bit, although the process could account for this. We've got 16 jurisdictions, and, what are, the planning process has to understand, and I felt like our listening sessions at least help show this. The needs are different. The interests are different depending on where you are in the county. Now, does that necessarily mean that because one area of the county didn't talk about something, that they're missing it? I mean, I don't know, but this is big, this concept, and in my listening, I'm not sure myself what we want, and I would want to be careful, however we decide to structure it, that maybe county is facilitating something, but if this isn't an incredibly inclusive process of all the other stakeholders that are out there, even if they're not qualified as an applicant, then we risk adopting something that I could see county staff taking a whole lot of heat for. And I wouldn't want to see that happen. So perhaps a separate workshop that helps us get into real detail of what we're trying to get at. I do think a gap analysis, which relates to needs, might be instructive, but that's still an incredibly public, inclusive process to determine that.
Yeah, and I tell you, I don't mean to be overwhelming in this, and I think when we say master plan, that sounds awfully big. I think my proposition here is strictly to take a more proactive position towards developing these projects wherever they are, based on what we generally have in mind, versus being strictly reactive to whoever comes in the door. And that's where we're at now, right? And that's what we do today, is we basically react to the projects that are presented to us. So my position is we should be a little more active in that process by not only spreading the things among the ECHO and also spreading the things regionally, and being generally more proactive at accomplishing more than simply taking who comes in the door. And so, you know, to me, I don't mean to make this a level of complexity that ends up getting tabled and we never do it. And there may be something in between that's pretty simple. And they may just be identifying regional areas of concern, and need analysis may very well be it. So I don't want it to, my impressions to be as though that we'd be leaning towards projects one way or the other, or that we create a big staffing problem or anything like that. All I'm trying to do is take a more proactive use of the funds so that we get most out of them. And so that's my general view towards it. And perhaps there's a workshop, and perhaps no one else even has that view. But to me, being on this committee for the 2.5 years that I have, it just seems apparent that that's the best way to get the most out of the dollars that we spend. So that's the general purpose. So if we want to put together a workshop, and it can be next year, it's nothing to me. I just see this as a reasonable goal that we put in, and we say, hey, we'd like to be a little more active at pursuing projects versus simply taking them when they come.
Well, and I even wonder if I've really, I enjoyed the concept that Mr. Alt brought forward about looking at each of these components, the ECHO, a little bit differently.
Yes.
And that maybe that's part of where you start the conversation, is understanding, well, how might we look at that differently? That's where we could have some inclusive public participation again. I mean, I think we heard some of that, quite frankly, already, but maybe that helps lead us towards.
Well, I agree that that's part of it, and more or less like customization of each of these categories that better reflects, their needs. And I think that would be part of it. Certainly, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, the question was asked at the workshop about, what other organizations can we, work with, and I had mentioned the historical. The county has a historical advisory panel, and then Councilwoman Post mentioned we also have the community cultural grant board. We are bricks and mortar; they are operational. It could be something as simple as, our annual reviews or the annual papers too, that reports that the cultural organizations are supposed to submit. Does that go to that board for them to get, some other details? I don't want to overcomplicate it either, but I liked what Jack said several meetings ago about trying to be more proactive, especially in historic, in the H. Because if you look at the history of a lot of those grants too, a lot of those are coming in under emergency grant situations where it's direct expenditures. And, if we had the complete picture, we might be able to just address that situation proactively.
Well, yeah, and it would be better managed. I mean, we just have a better idea. For instance, if we had a concern, and I think of Mosquito Lagoon and all the issues there, we say, we have a concern there. That's an area that we'd like to concentrate on. And that goes to the E, and we all say, oh, that is something we'd like to think about. We'd like more projects there because there's a need there. And so, yeah, I think a lot of these are generalities, and the devil's in the details. So there may be a lot of work to get there, but clearly it's a reasonable objective, at least. So I don't know where you would like to go. Perhaps you've gotten more input than you care to hear. Any other discussion concerning that? Go ahead.
Do you have anything to do with the VCCA? Not the grant, but the Volusia County Cultural Associate.
Oh.
Do you, Reggie, do you?
Talking about the Volusia County Cultural Arts Advisory Board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or are you
Not-
talking
not
about
the grant-
VCCA?
CCA.
So they're a separate nonprofit.
Right.
They are actually the ones that meet independently and decide who gets to have the award of the year, and it is placed in our building. But other than that, we don't have a direct relationship with them. Yeah, they're a private nonprofit.
They're just an advocate for. the
Exactly.
arts.
They're an advocacy group.
Maybe you're thinking of the Cultural Council that gives grants based on budget for cultural organizations.
And that group is under
Advisory.
Parks and Recreation, under our department. Now, I do want to clarify on the Historic Preservation Advisory Board, they actually have a planning and regulatory purpose. They do not provide any funding at all. They review whether a building or property, as it were, meets historic criteria either by our local historic preservation ordinance standards, and they can make recommendations as to whether it should be forwarded to the state or the national level for historic preservation recognition. But they don't do any funding. They only look at the specific issues when they come before the board, and they meet quarterly.
How do they look at it? I mean, when you say they look at that, I mean, are folks bringing them buildings and saying, hey, there's a building that needs.
Sir, and there's an ordinance that has details of what makes a building or a piece of property historically significant.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion concerning this? Can we at least say that in our next meeting, we can address goals? Because we need to, right?
Sure, if you'd like to set a next meeting, that'd be great, because your next meeting actually is August 13th. Well, all your meetings are grant-related in the future.
Yes, but that doesn't keep us from talking about goals, does it?
You probably won't have time on that day. It is a full day. Jill she goes out and she has every last little mile calculated. She'll give you exact directions on how to get from point A to point B, because you can't ride together. She's got it all mapped out, and then you come back and you talk about them. So I would highly recommend that you have a separate day to talk about your goals, and we'll be happy to work with you all to schedule that, but I wouldn't recommend that you do it. For those of you that have been on the board, Reggie, I guess.
I have.
That's a long day.
I've been in there.
Okay, so it's a super long day.
Understood. Well, I tell you, I don't, I'm looking, we've had our fair share of meetings, certainly, and the question is really whether we can justify meetings strictly to determine the goals. I'm not sure how we, want to do that. Whether we want another meeting.
Chairman?
Sure, Stacy.
Sorry, I can see a benefit in that, because I also wanted to get clarification. In some of the meeting minutes, Brad had explained that green infrastructure is an eligible expense. And I'd like to have more of a discussion on eligibility for applications, including things that fall into that category, like the living shoreline and some of the other topics that came up from our listening sessions. So maybe we want to consider a separate meeting to discuss that as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, and based on the timeline you have here, our connection to our next meeting is really the tour, right? Per se.
November 18th is our next meeting.
If you call it a meeting, and we can talk about that. And so, otherwise, we would just have to pick a new date and set it. Is that something we want to do? I'm receptive to it. I'm clearly receptive to another meeting, and be glad to do that.
I would say that maybe you guys or Jill can look at her schedule, maybe pick 3 or 4 dates and send them to us, and then we'll pick a date that's good for everyone. We could.
Fair enough. It sounds like we do have enough of
Yeah.
a topic, and there's probably even more by the time we get there. So,
I would say, if you could look into, September, would be good.
okay, good. All right. So we'll set up another date and talk about with the key subject being establishing the goals for next year. Good.
I'd like to make a suggestion. You're asking how we can get other projects done, applicants. I have found, engage your county council person. I invited who appointed me last year, and she came to the tour. We've already met, and we've already identified projects we'd like to see in our district. They're the ones that vote. Engage them on what we do. It's all a good thing. And I think we'll get a lot more done if they're involved. And involve them from the beginning. Invite them to come on the tour so they can really see what these applicants are asking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I tell you, but in the listening sessions per se, we didn't have much participation. And from a
Maybe
standpoint
because they
of
don't know that much about it.
Well, that's why you listen.
Yeah.
But I hear you, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And there's a lot of other community efforts that participation with them certainly gets more yardage. Yes, Don.
It's a great idea because it is a publicly noticed meeting, and we can just change the public notice to make sure that everyone knows that there may be multiple county council members in attendance as well. Everybody has to drive separately,
Right.
but I believe it was Ms. Gertman that came.
Right.
And so that was very beneficial, and she has actually been contacting Carmen, now Brad, about a project that's of special interest in DeLand that Carmen's been working with for a couple of years. They need some help, but because they're
Who's engaged?
right, and so that could help. But that has them going back out into the community that they represent, saying, "Hey, did you know about this?" She's also advocating for recreational space, which is desperately needed in Southwest Volusia and West Volusia. So that's a great idea. One of the things that I want to tell you that we really want to focus on, we were very excited that this was renewed for the 20 years. And one of the things that I feel that we have, fail is too strong a word, not done as well as we should have, is market the amazing assets that we have here. Not just on the Echo side, but on the Forever side. We hear over and over again that people on the Forever side have no idea that they can access almost every one of those parks any day of the week. There are some that are restricted, but for the most part, they can access those parks. And we need to do a better job. We were talking about Pictona. I leaned over, I said, we need to make sure that we're joint marketing that incredible asset now and when it's expanded. We need to do that for other assets too. So we'll be coming back to you with some ideas, hopefully that you'll give your blessing to. If you have great ideas, we're willing to listen and see what we can do to try to implement it. But I think that as well, we need to make sure that our folks here in Volusia County know that they can go see these assets. When they know what's here, they can better tell us what they're missing, what they really need. So I think that's going to go hand in hand with what you're trying to accomplish of figuring out what is missing from our community. But then we also want to market it to the broader community beyond Volusia County.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, this has come up time and again where we're trying to get the word out of these various things. And I think there's going to have to be some creativity with it. And without question, there's been a lack of publicity, just straight up publicity. I'm not talking about going further on true marketing, but just the publicity side of it. And we've talked about this a bunch, and so I'll be very interested in any recommendations you have, and I think we should, I'll take them to heart for sure, because I think that's a complication that's been, is really identified when we started to go for the vote. Again, remember the last time, and we were all talking about, people don't even know what these things are, and if they don't know where they are, they're not accessing them, and they're not seeing it as a good use of tax dollars, and they're such assets. And so when you tell them, Echo had something to do with this or that gets identified through the press or from other things, it raises eyebrows, and the trails I think are great. That's a great example of something that they're starting to promote and do more with it. Should be a big part of it. So thank you, Don. And so perhaps in the next meeting, you can have some of those suggestions for us. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to bring up a sore subject that's connected to the tour, and this is addressing it to the lawyer in the room about having to drive all our separate cars on what appears to be some sort of I know it's a legal problem. I understand the problem, okay? But this thing ends up being like some sort of scavenger hunt that I know Jill does her best. But as a participant to this before, it seems to me that if we cannot have a vehicle and have the attorney or an attorney ride in the back of this vehicle so that we don't in fact talk about the projects, I don't see the reason we have to do our cars individually, and I ask for a difference in comparison to what we've done in the past.
The prior advice on it was based on some litigation here in the 5th District Court of Appeal with actually I believe the Seminole County School Board. And so I can take another look at it if you like and report back if I have a different opinion. But I understand the prior opinion.
Okay. Well, fair enough. That's all. I guess at least we'll take a look at it. That's all.
It keeps you out of trouble.
Excuse me?
It keeps you out of trouble. Having 20 years in this process, well, the county council was different than the state legislature. As a legislator, you and I could have all the conversations we want without letting anybody know about what we were talking about. But you get 2 or 3 state legislators together, then you got to call for a meeting. So everybody thinks that they just band together and do that, but I see the need for it because I been many years ago watched county commissioners sitting down and talking deals out that just went on forever. So it's a necessary evil. So I don't have a problem with it, but
yeah.
It would be nice.
I don't. Yeah, mine's just the inconvenience. It's not a problem. I'm capable. My GPS does work, but it seems to me silly if in fact the conversation didn't take place. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just add that for 13 years on the Orange County Board, we all get on the shuttle bus and we go around to all of the different facilities, never had a problem. Attorney's there. So I don't know if that helps, if you could talk to them. I don't know how they deal with it, but we've never had an issue.
Thank you. Let me go back to my question about acceptable absences and whether there was a declaration about that.
So the strategy that Russ and I have devised is to bring it to council with the rest of this stuff that's going on August 17th.
Yes, please.
Or was the recommendation for year 1?
You can miss 4 meetings.
Correct.
4 meetings.
4 meetings.
Just for year 1.
For year one.
Okay, good.
Because otherwise, we talked about it a little more, it says quarterly meetings, so if you could miss a whole year of meetings and there'd be no consequence, so that's why we said for year 1.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just asking generalities, but certainly that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, I had a question relative to the timeline. In the case of the guidebook being presented to the county council on the 17th, where will that take place?
County council meeting.
So it'll be here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I know it's not our meeting. I'm just asking when it would be presented then. All right. Any other questions or comments relative to the timeline that's been established and set? Okay.
With the mandatory workshop, Um, Is it helpful for, I mean, has anybody on the advisory panel ever attended that?
As an applicant.
I haven't, but I think they have though. Yeah. Right.
Yes. They have. And just so we were waiting to finish this meeting today, but the press release is ready to go out. This year we'll offer individuals an opportunity to attend in person or virtually.
That's good. Okay. All right, upcoming meetings. I guess we're to the public participation part of the meeting. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak? Okay, no participation. So advisory committee comments. Any comments by anyone? Committee itself?
Just one final comment to staff. You talked about at the workshop about how you work with nonprofits, try to get ready. One of the things I think you could emphasize a lot more is have them attend some of our meetings and sit out here and listen to us question the YMCA or some of these organizations that are late, and just see the process. I think that would help them tremendously.
Let me ask a question that you may have no answer for, and that is, do you have a feel for the number of applicants that we'll get this time around? No feel.
I mean, we know that there are applications coming, but they're going to show up at the. We always know that there's a handful that are going to apply, but we always find out more during the mandatory workshop, and some of those even drop out, and then others.
Well, is there a public notification that in fact we're
Absolutely.
seeking projects, and when has that gone out, or is it going out?
That's what he just announced.
Okay, that's what it's going.
As soon as you approve our calendar that's in front of you for the upcoming meetings for the grant cycle, it's going to be published, and it will be published on our websites. It'll go to the news media. It will go to on all of our social media. We'll be getting it out there as much as possible. I would imagine that Brad will be interviewed, on the radio show and all those good things.
That's great.
All previous grant recipients also get the announcement.
That's real good. Do we need to approve that timeline, or because I assumed that it was ongoing and we added to that with another date, so you don't need our approval for that, right? Okay. All right. Okay. Any other committee comments? Okay. With that, we're adjourned.
Good job.
Yeah. There you go. I wasn't ready for that.
Dear John. I said, dear John.
No. What's that?
That you took the script and
Oh, yeah.
I have the same plan.
Yeah, of course.
You talked about projects you'd like to see happen and ones that had already happened.
And they get more engaged when
Oh
they
my
see what's
God,
going
I love
on.
that.
Yeah. Heather.
Heather Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just hesitant. You know, I don't know.